You know that coffee mug you use every morning? Ever really looked at that smooth, shiny surface? You might think it's just some kind of paint, but it's actually so much more than that. It's a marvel of material science, this perfectly engineered layer of glass fused right onto the clay. So let's dive into this hidden world and really uncover the science hiding right there on the surface. Yeah, look at that. It's not just a simple coating slapped on top. Nope. This is a precisely formulated glass, and it's designed to create a surface that's not only beautiful, but also incredibly functional. Think about it. A glaze takes something that's porous and kind of fragile, the raw clay, and transforms it into a durable, waterproof, and super hygienic object that we can use every single day. It's pretty amazing. Okay, so this begs the question, right? What is this stuff, really? And how on earth do potters and big industrial manufacturers control it so perfectly? I mean, everything from the color and texture to making sure it's safe and lasts forever. Well, that is exactly what we are going to break down right now. So let's get right to it. At its heart, a ceramic glaze is basically a custom-engineered glass coating. It's designed to do three things perfectly: melt at a very specific temperature, flow just the right amount, not too much, not too little, and then cool down to form this super hard, permanent bond with the clay underneath. It's all about control. So, what's a glazer's job, really? Well, it's got a few big ones. First off, there's protection. It seals up that porous clay so it becomes totally waterproof. Then you've got durability. It adds this tough, scratch-resistant surface. Super important is hygiene, right? Especially for anything you eat or drink from. It creates a non-porous finish that's a breeze to clean and stops bacteria from growing. And of course, the fun part, aesthetics. This is where you get all those incredible colors, textures, and finishes. All right, so how do you actually make this magic glass? The best way to think about it is like a recipe. But instead of, flour and sugar, we're talking about a bunch of different metal oxides. And every single glaze recipe, no matter what, is built on three essential families of ingredients. Okay, first step in our recipe is silica, or silicon dioxide if you want to get technical. This is the star of the show. It's the flower of our glaze recipe. Chemists call it a network former, which is just a fancy way of saying it's the stuff that actually forms the glass. Now, on its own, silica has a crazy high melting point, but once you get it to melt and then cool down, boom, you get that beautiful, transparent, glassy structure. Next up, we need some alumina. So if silica is our flour, you can think of alumina as the glue or maybe a thickener. Why do you need it? Well, when that glaze gets super hot and melts in the kiln, you definitely don't want it just dripping off the sides of your pot, right? Alumina adds viscosity. It stiffens up the molten glaze and makes sure it stays put while it's firing. And ingredient number 3, the fluxes. These guys are the melters. Remember how I said silica has a super high melting point? We're talking way too high for most ceramic kilns. That's where fluxes come in. These are metal oxides, things like sodium oxide, potassium oxide, calcium oxide, and their whole job is to lower silica's melting point down to a temperature we can actually work with. They are absolutely essential for the glass to form in the first place. So here's a look at the key players all laid out. On the left, you've got your fluxes. Those are the melters. In the middle, the main stabilizer, alumina. And over on the right, the glass formers, with silica leading the pack. The real magic happens when chemists carefully balance the ratios of these three groups. That's how they get control over pretty much everything in the final glaze. Okay, so now there's a bit of a problem. Some of the absolute best raw materials you can use in a glaze have a major downside. They can dissolve in water. Or even worse, they can be toxic. We're talking things like lead. But the industrial solution to this is actually pretty brilliant. It's a process called fritting. Let's break down the two main ways to make a glaze. You've got your raw glaze, which is basically just a simple mix of ground-up minerals and water. Easy enough. But then you have a fritted glaze, which uses this special ingredient called a frit. Think of a frit as a pre-cooked ingredient. What manufacturers do is take all those raw materials, including the tricky, soluble, and toxic ones, melt them all together into a glass, cool it down super fast, and then grind it up into a fine powder. This whole process literally locks those unstable, dangerous components into a stable, safe, glassy structure. It's genius. And the advantages of doing this are huge. I mean, first and foremost, it makes toxic stuff like lead safe to handle, and it lets you use all those water-soluble ingredients without any issues. The end result is a glaze that's way more consistent and reliable. Oh, and it can also create much brighter, more brilliant surfaces. For any kind of large-scale production, using Frit is an absolute game changer. So, with all these different chemicals and endless options, how do chemists and artists even begin to understand, compare, and invent new glazes? You might think it's a lot of guesswork, but it's not. They use a standardized blueprint. Yeah, I love this quote from the ceramicist Nilo Tazzi. He says, "A glaze is like a match. You have to strike it to see if it works." And that really captures the trial and error feeling, doesn't it? But to get beyond just hoping for the best and move into predictable design, chemists needed a real analytical tool. They needed a way to get repeatable, reliable results every time. And this is it. This is the tool. It's called the Seger formula, or sometimes the unity formula. Now, I know it looks a little intimidating at first glance, but trust me, it's actually pretty simple. It's just a way of organizing those three groups of oxides we already talked about. See the columns? On the left, you've got the fluxes, in the middle, the stabilizers, and on the right, the glass formers. It's that same basic recipe structure, just laid out in a standardized way. So, how does it actually work? It's basically a three-step process. First, you take your recipe with all the ingredients listed by weight. Then, you figure out the molecular parts, or moles, of each oxide that those ingredients bring to the party. And then, and this is the really important part, you do a little bit of math to make the total of that first flux column add up to exactly 1. This whole process, called normalization, creates a universal standard. It means you can look at any two glaze recipes from anywhere in the world and compare them apples to apples. And once you understand this blueprint, it unlocks a whole new world of creative and technical control. Seriously, it lets you move beyond just guessing and hoping and lets you start designing glazes with incredible precision. You can control pretty much everything, from how see-through it is to how it feels to the touch. So, for example, by tweaking that formula, you can completely control the opacity. You can design a glaze that's perfectly crystal clear, just like glass. Or you can add in what are called opacifiers, things like zirconium, to create these really deep, solid, opaque colors. Texture is another big one you can control. A nice, balanced glaze is going to cool down into that familiar, smooth, glossy surface. But what if you play with the formula to encourage tiny little microcrystals to grow as the glaze cools? Well, that's how you get those beautiful, non-reflective, matte finishes. And this might be the most critical part of all. This science helps prevent all sorts of ugly defects. See, the glaze and the clay it's sitting on have to expand and contract together when they get heated and cooled. They have to be compatible. If that fit is wrong, the glaze can get these tiny cracks all over it, which is called crazing. The unity formula is the absolute key to engineering that perfect fit. So the next time you pick up a ceramic bowl or just admire a tiled wall, I want you to take a closer look at that surface, because now you know it's not just a simple shiny coating, is it? It's an entire universe of chemical design, a recipe that's been carefully balanced and fired to create a material that is truly equal parts art and science.